We had a problem of rats getting into our attic space. Well, one of them died and it started stinking up the bathroom. At first, I thought it was a sewage issue. I went as far as replacing the toilet. Well, when that didn't get rid of the smell, I knew I was going to have to tear into the drywall. You're not able to get into the area above the bathroom, so I ended up cutting a 3-foot square piece of drywall out of the ceiling, and I found the rat. I'll spare you that image, but the rat and smell are gone. I replaced the drywall, did a quick patch job on the seams. I still need to tape the corners, finish the seams, smooth it all out, spray some texture on it, and then paint it to match the rest of the bathroom. Let's finish this on Brew Build. I removed about an inch of the texture from the existing drywall edge to help blend the seams before using the mesh tape and joint compound. I'll be doing the same thing along the corner as well. I find that by removing the texture and even some of the drywall paper, I'm able to avoid the bump that you can get along a seam when repairing drywall. Using a utility knife, I'm trying to cut out and remove the old seam tape, which will pull off the texture and paint. I usually end up removing a layer of the drywall paper as well, which is fine because the mesh tape will strengthen it back up. If you try taping over textured drywall, you can end up with a very large bump that will need to be feathered on each side to hide. I'm sure most skilled drywall installers would think that this is a waste of time and would just feather it by making a 12-inch wide seam to hide the bump. I find that by doing it this way requires a lot less sanding, which makes a lot less dust. And I'm able to make a nice looking corner and keep it square. If you notice new drywall panels, the long edge has an indent for the seam, so you don't end up with a bump. I'm just trying to recreate the indent. Once I have the old tape and texture removed, I'll place drywall mesh tape over the seam. Mesh tape is DIY friendly, and I find it much easier to use than joint paper. It has a sticky side that will hold it in place until you get it covered with joint compound. For a corner, I will fold it in half before sticking it on the wall. Since the joint compound embeds itself into the mesh tape, I've never had an issue with it coming off of a wall. There are a few places in my house where the joint paper wasn't installed properly and has started to peel, resulting in a crack. I'm using an all-purpose joint compound for this project. Add it to the bottom side first and work it into the gap and mesh tape. Then add the compound to the top and smooth it out. The first coat doesn't need to be perfect. Just smooth it out and try to remove voids or tool bumps. Since I'm using regular joint compound on the seams, it will take a day to dry. I want to remove this vent cover before I start sanding. It will make it easier to blend. Wow, that is some lovely wallpaper. For the corner, I'm using a sanding block that I've had for years with 150 grit sandpaper, using light pressure to remove the high spots. I should be using a vacuum to catch the dust. I have a drywall sander that attaches to a shop vac that I will be using to do the rest of the sanding. This does a fantastic job at removing that fine drywall dust. If you have done any drywall sanding, you know how messy it can be and dust gets everywhere. I highly recommend getting one of these if you do any amount of drywall repair, but you will need a shop vac. I picked the sander up from I think Harbor Freight probably about 10 years ago. Once again, I'm just smoothing out the high spots, preparing it for the second, wider coat of joint compound. There are some old screw anchors that need to be removed and the holes patched. To remove a plastic anchor, put in a screw just part way, Pull on the screw and you should be able to pull the anchor right out. With a drywall knife, scrape away any loose paint and drywall paper. To patch these, I'll use some quick drying Dry Decks by DAP. What is nice about this is it's a bright pink color when you put it on, but it will turn white when it dries. I'll wipe off any extra compound because I just want to fill the holes and not smooth out any of the texture. You can see some of the mesh tape showing through. Be careful when sanding that you don't tear the tape. This looks ready for the second coat. I do have a corner drywall knife that I will use in the corner. For the second coat, I'll be using a 6-inch drywall knife, feathering the edges. Once I get an even amount along the seam, I'll run the corner knife along the length, trying to maintain an even pressure. Then I'll take a regular knife and clean up the corner and remove any ridges. I should be able to sand this and end up with a nice corner. Looks like I used my hat to add a bit of texture. I guess it's better than using my hair. Let me just smooth this back out. I need to give this one more light sanding after it dries. It's a little messy here, but it should sand out smoothly. Then I can add some spray texture to match the existing ceiling. I'll be using this quick drying wall texture that I had on hand. I don't really like this stuff because it smells toxic, but I'll give it a shot. Not sure if this can has enough left in it. It's almost out. Gosh, this is nasty smelling. I gotta open a window. I didn't get nearly enough on. They do make a water-based version in a can that doesn't smell nearly as toxic, but it's not quick drying. Well, I'm done with the cans and I'm going to use my spray texture hopper. This plugs into an air compressor and then there's a special texture mix that you use with it. A lot of setup for a small job, but it works much better compared to a can. I just need to mix up a small amount. You want it to have the consistency of a milkshake. I prefer chocolate. I hope that's enough. Just need to pour it into the hopper. This is a cheaper sprayer, and once you attach the hose, it starts blowing, so be aware. The trigger just adds texture into the spray gun. It's really not that noisy, but it sure freaked out the camera audio. Same principle as spraying paint. Start moving before pulling the trigger and release before stopping. I'm trying to get an even amount of texture across the drywall and adding a little bit more along the seams. Wipe off any overspray if you didn't cover things up like me. The stuff from the hopper doesn't dry too fast and it can be wiped off with a little bit of water if needed. If you use the quick drying stuff out of the can, you only have minutes and you may need to use paint thinner to wipe it off. I think with a little paint, this should blend in very well. I might do a light sanding on some of this to knock the texture down. The texture will get a little smaller as it dries, then we, meaning my wife, can paint this. And here are the finished results. I don't think anyone will notice that this has been patched. The corners look great and you can't see the seam in the middle of the bathroom. I hope this inspires you to tackle patching your own drywall, and be sure to watch some of my other home improvement videos I have on brew builds. Subscribe, hit the like button, and share this with your friends. Thanks for watching. Time for me to move on to the next project.